everybody understands is that development is only part of the game, and particularly if you think about courses. Courses are only part of development. So we typically say 70, 20, 10. 70% of your individual learning and my learning happens in our day-to-day activity. Just by doing this interview, I'm learning again, and you're learning, right? It's just doing our job. 20% is where we have people around us on our job who coach us and give us feedback and all of that. Only 10% is classroom.
Hi folks, today we are back with one more great and leading personality, Mr. Mark Vernooij. Mark Vernooij is an experienced entrepreneur, board member, startup mentor, and innovation and strategy consultant. Mark focuses on innovation and leadership programs for individuals and organizations. He has been faculty at various institutions including Berkeley, Columbia, Stanford, and Wharton, and is a regular speaker and facilitator at events and conferences including the World Economic Forum, where he is a member of the WEF Expert Network on Innovation. He is currently a partner at THNK School of Creative Leadership, and advisor innovation and sustainability at Dutch private equity fund Active Capital Company. Mark was a consultant with Accenture and McKinsey and founded several companies in the entertainment industry and digital media. He holds a master's degree from Delft University of Technology, an MBA from INSEAD, and is a certified board member. So, let's begin our talk with our today's guest, Mr. Mark Vernooij.
First of all, sir, I welcome you to in this session. Thank you so much for joining and agreeing to share your thoughts with us. We are extremely very happy to have you for today's talk.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
So same here. It's our pleasure too. So sir, moving to the topic of today's session, which we have chosen is leadership, have the courage to challenge yourself. So it's a kind of request you kindly explain our viewers, how do you define leadership in your own words?
Yeah, so there's many definitions to leadership. I think the way we look at it is we look at it not as a position or a title or a stage in your career, but rather an act of courage, an act of standing up, an act that anybody can take, regardless of position, age, seniority. But it's an act to step up, to create a vision, to navigate in the direction of that vision, and to take people along.
I think, sir, you have very beautifully explained. Sir, my next question to you is, what do you believe, what are the qualities and skills needed to be a strong leader?
So it's hard to say, because I deeply believe that leadership is highly context dependent. So if you're in one country, in one business or industry, it can be very different if you're in another country or another business or industry. So depending on the context you operate in, you need a different kind of leadership. Now, there's some ultimate truths. So there's some things that pretty much work everywhere or are important everywhere. Like, for example, the skill and the understanding to really know yourself. Leadership starts with knowing self. If you don't know who you are and how you behave and where you come from, it becomes extremely difficult to start interacting with others and leading others, because you bring that with you. For us at THNK, we call ourselves THNK School of Creative Leadership. And we try and develop the kind of leadership that can change the world, can positively impact the world. The kind of leaders that can, as I said before, create a bold vision, a creative vision, can navigate in the direction of that vision in an agile way, because the path will never be linear, and can take people along in that vision. So I think those three traits, being able to come up with a bold vision, being able to be agile in delivering on that vision, and being able to take other people along, is really important in the context where you need creative leadership, where you need new solutions to difficult problems. But in some other contexts, you would need a different kind of leadership.
All right, sir. Again, it was really a very quite insightful answer from your side. And so you have made many good points. And one which I like the most is that you told leadership starts with knowing yourself. I think we all need to understand this. And I am pretty sure that during this conversation, the things which you are going to told us will be fruitful for our viewers. Not only I think, but I do strongly believe, sir, it will be helpful for them as well. Sir, my next question to you, what do you believe, what are the common leadership challenges?
So I think if we look at today's world, I see at least 4 big pressures, might be 5 or 6, that come towards leaders. And then I say leaders of organizations, people who are trying to get their organization from A to B. And if I list them off, obviously right now we're in the middle of COVID, so obviously that's a challenge to deal with. At the same time, COVID will pass at some point. Like so many things, also this will pass. I think there's some longer term trends that we see. Like, for example, we see that customers and consumers are more demanding than they've ever been. So they demand fast, great quality at low prices any time of the day. And if you don't deliver it, then somebody else will. And even if they're on another continent, you can ship it in a day. So, the pressure from customers and consumers is a lot higher than we've seen in history. If I look at competition, it's a very similar kind of challenge. Competition is stepping up their game. And competition is coming from all kinds of angles. I just mentioned the global perspective. So, I mean, historically, you might have been competing with people in your city or in your town or in your country. Now you're competing with anyone in the world. Historically, you might have been competing in a specific vertical. Like if you're in travel, you only can. So competition is coming from different angles. And right now, in the middle of COVID, what we've seen is that, well, people were taken seriously. So employees are demanding more from employers or from leaders. And then the final one, I'd say, is, or the second but final one, the next one at least, is the pressure from society. Society is demanding companies to do more, to take more responsibility. Not just responsibility to adhere to the law and make profits, but also act in a moral way and take responsibility for a wider range of issues than they were forced to take into account earlier. Whether that is on climate change, whether that is on diversity and inclusion right now with the Black Lives Matter movement, or whether that's on other topics of including your local community or paying your wages fairly, all of that. And then I think maybe a final one is the pressure of technology. Technology is accelerating quite a bit. We all know that, we all see it, we experience it every day with the devices that we have in our pockets. But also if I'm speaking to leaders of organizations, then the question of, hey, what should we do with this technology, with that technology? Is it relevant for us? It's such a fast changing landscape that's a serious pressure that's coming their way. And it's about deciding, do I invest against this? Is this already ready? Is it relevant for my business? And these are not easy questions. So yeah, it's quite a couple of challenges there.
Indeed, sir. Again, it was quite insightful answer from your side, and I think today it's a kind of privilege that we got to hear all those things from you. Sir, my next question to you: what do you believe? We have seen that many organizations has started keep organizing the leadership development programs. So, sir, I want to know your opinion. How do you look at what is the importance and effect of these leadership development programs?
Yeah, so this is our business, right? We help companies develop these programs, and we also develop programs ourselves where individuals can subscribe and come to think, whether that's in one of our physical locations or whether that's online. I think so we have to develop our employees. It's depending on the business you're in, but very often it's one of your biggest assets. If it's not one of your biggest assets, it might be one of your biggest liabilities. So in all cases, there's a real need to help these people, to make them better so they can perform better, together. Very often it's not about their individual skills, but about connecting them to each other, building more trust, creating a psychologically safe space. So getting these people to collaborate better is extremely important, and will have a multi-X return on investment very often. There's a whole part around reskilling, obviously. At least 40, if not 60% of jobs will be redundant or will change materially. That means that a lot of people will need reskilling. So that's a whole sector where you need to put development at work. I think what not everybody understands is that development is only part of the game, and particularly if you think about courses are only part of development. So we typically say 70, 20, 10. 70% of your individual learning and my learning happens in our day-to-day activity. Just by doing this interview, I'm learning again and you're learning again, right? It's just doing our job. 20% is where we have people around us on our job who coach us and give us feedback and all of that. Only 10% is classroom learning. So the learning programs that is our business is only 10% of development. And then development is only a quarter of the change. So if you think about making a change in your company, then obviously you need to reskill and train and redevelop your leadership. But that has to go together with a wider envelope of activities. You have to make sure that you explain well, why do we need to change? What needs to happen? So your storytelling needs to be in order. People are only going to change when they hear why they need to change and why they need to change now and when they believe that story. Secondly, you need to make sure that you're walking the talk and other people are walking the talk. If I don't see my leaders behave in a way that is reflecting of the kind of culture or organization we want to be, then I'm not going to do it, right? If you ask me to clean up the trash after myself, but you don't do it and I see nobody else do it, then I'm the only sucker who's doing it. And that's not sustainable. So role modeling is the second part. And then very often the organizational incentives and structures and mechanisms have to be updated. If you want to make a change, you have to make sure that incentives might have to be realigned. Like, for example, we do a lot of work on innovation. If companies want to increase their amount of innovation, then maybe you have to incentivize that. But also if you think about performance reviews, if you have your weekly or monthly or quarterly or yearly performance reviews and budget meetings and all of that, if 90% or 100% of that agenda is about performance, i.e. your financial results, and none of that agenda is about how much innovation you're getting, then employees are going to hear that message. So the structures and reinforcing mechanisms also have to change. So learning is critically important. I think it's a big investment that companies can make and it will pay off, but it's only part of the puzzle.
Indeed, sir. I think you have covered all aspects related to it and told very beautifully why it is important and how it can give us a better return if we spend on employees, giving them regular leadership development programs. Sir, my next question to you is, what do you believe? What are the factors responsible for the growth of organization?
For the growth of organizations?
Yes, correct.
Wow. That's a big question. What are the factors responsible for growth? I mean, there's so much that goes into that. So if I look at smaller organizations and the startup community, right, there's a very small percentage of startups that actually makes it, let alone makes it and makes it big. Like scale-ups are about 0.5% or so, 1 in 200. For those companies, it's having an idea that matters and is timely. Timing is of the essence there. A lot of the ideas are just too early. It's a lot of hard work, so it doesn't come cheap. I don't know anybody who's got an overnight. I mean, there's not a lot of overnight successes that weren't 10 years in the making, right? And then there's a ridiculous amount of luck. So then next to eBay, there were also B-Bay, C-Bay, and D-Bay that started, right? For every success, there's a bunch of failures. And so I think that's on the startup side. I think if you look at the more large enterprise side, there's a lot of things that go in there. There's a lot about strategy, right? Having the right strategy, and being in the right industry matters a lot, right? If you're, and we see this now big time in COVID. Some industries are just screwed through COVID, but also I liked how Sven Smith wrote about it in his book, Beyond the Hockey Stick. He said basically every industry is like an escalator, and some escalators go fast and some go slow. Some actually go down and you have to run against the escalator like we all did as boys, right? We ran up the other side. So picking a right strategy is tremendously important. Then culture is, we do a lot of work on culture, and getting a culture that is high performing, where people want to put their best foot forward, where people want to work, are excited, is a huge one. So yeah, I think I can rattle off things, but I don't know if there's any answer to what goes into growth, or if there's at least a comprehensive answer.
Indeed, sir. Sir, my next question to you, do you think that necessity is the mother of innovation?
That's a cool question. A lot of people have said that. And I think it is a mother of innovation. So yes, a lot of innovations came from necessity. So if you look at the amount of things that came from crises, is ridiculous. Like M&Ms came from crises, tea came from crises, the printing press, all were invented during wartime. And sometimes that's necessity, sometimes it's just that the opportunity shows itself. I think also a lot of innovation comes from frustration. People are just angry with the current status of the situation. People are just frustrated with why things are the way they are. Like for us, when we founded THNK, we said, we've been to, and we were lucky, right? We were very privileged. We went to some of the best schools in the world, to some of the best universities. And still, we thought it wasn't a great experience. We said, what would it take to build a school that we would really want to attend and then not get in. So for us, it was a little bit about frustration with the way the current system was. For some people, innovation comes out of sheer tinkering. There's a beautiful host of research around what comes from tinkering. People who are just playing with stuff. People who just do something and stumble on something. Like deep freezing came from a guy who figured it out during ice fishing. So there's so many things that come from just tinkering and playing around. I think what is also maybe what's the father of innovation. So these are the mothers. They're really important. There's also a factor of just sheer hard work. If you think about some of the innovators we respect, take Steve Jobs. Most people would respect Steve Jobs in some way, shape, or form for the innovations he brought to life. How many innovations did he bring to life in his career, in his life? I mean, you can probably count it on one, maybe two hands. And he's one of the most successful, right? So the amount of innovation you can do, and therefore the time it takes, both in terms of the number of failure along the way, but also just to get it right, is a lot of time and a lot of hard work. So sometimes innovation is seen as just happiness, sitting on beanbags, eating pizza, and brainstorming. That's not even 1% of the work. 99% still needs to happen. So I think hard work is one of the other ones that definitely should go on the list of being responsible for innovation.
Indeed, sir. Again, it was quite insightful answer. Sir, I have a question from one of my subscriber. Actually, he is asking that we have seen many successful entrepreneurs started their venture in college itself during their studies only. On the other side, we have seen that many people believe that let's work for some different organization and gain some experience, then we will start our own venture. So what do you think, which one is better choice?
And so you're asking me whether it's better to start straight out of university or after you've got some work experience?
Yes, correct. Yes.
So the advantage of starting out of university is that you still have a lot of time. And the amount of hours and energy you could put in are typically a little bit higher. Burning the midnight oil is a little bit easier if you're 23 than if you're 43 like me. But if you look at the statistics, and we've done the research on this, if you want to build a successful company, so a scale up, if you want to build a scale up, then one of the factors that goes in there is actually experience. So if you look at the difference between startups and scale-ups, or so companies that stay small and some companies that become big, the scale-ups on average are, the founders are in their 40s. So this notion of let's get a bunch of students, toss a pizza under the door, and you'll get a startup. Yes, you'll get a startup, but you won't get a scale-up. Statistically, it won't grow big. Mark Zuckerberg is an anomaly. Statistically, he doesn't exist. So despite the fact that we hear a lot of student stories and success stories about young guys or girls becoming successful really early on, like Airbnb, like Facebook, we talk about these because they are anomalies, not because they are the rule. That doesn't mean you shouldn't start something when you're young. I had my first startup in my teens. Back then it wasn't called a startup, it was just called doing something. But and it gave me a ton of learning. But you just shouldn't be expecting to become extremely successful in that time.
Again, sir, it was quite wonderful advice from your side. Sir, I must say that there's a lot to learn from you. But today I don't want to take you much time. So moving to my last question of this session, actually the question is, what can be the role of innovation and technology on entrepreneurship, especially in developing countries?
Yeah, so very often innovation and entrepreneurship are very closely related. Very often they actually mean the same thing. It's not always the case, right? There's entrepreneurs who don't innovate, but most entrepreneurs do innovate. And those are and the other way around, a lot of innovation comes from entrepreneurs. There's also innovation coming from researchers in all kinds of universities and from large companies, but a lot of it comes from entrepreneurs. So I think those things are relatively closely linked. I think if you look at technology, then there's an abundance of new possibilities coming out. And I think there's a huge role to play. I think we sometimes, it's interesting, most technologies develop on an exponential path. So most technologies become more attractive as more people use it. And therefore there's these inherent effects that make them move in an exponential way. Sometimes it's also technology driven in the way that it's done by Moore's law, right? The processor gets exponentially smaller, cheaper, and faster. So most technologies behave in an exponential curve. Now, our view of the future is linear. We find it very, very difficult to comprehend exponential growth. Our brain is just not made for it. So if I were to ask you, hey, we've got a lily pond. On day 1, I put 1 lily in it. On day 40, it's completely covered. How much covered is it on day 39? Most people will struggle to identify that on day 39, it's only half covered. And on day 1 through pretty much 13, 15, you don't see anything. Nothing is happening. So our brain just struggles with that concept. Now, if you have an exponential line and a linear view, then that means you're over predicting the effect of technology in the short term and under predicting it in the long term. So in the short term, we think that this new technology, say VR, is going to take over the world. And actually it takes a lot longer than we thought. In the long term, it's impossible sometimes to predict the effects of technology. When we saw the car instead of the horse, nobody predicted traffic jams. When some people invented the elevator, nobody invented high-rise and skyscrapers. It's just very, very difficult to look that far ahead. I mean, there's always exceptions to these rules, but in general, that's very difficult. So if you think about technology and entrepreneurship, then don't forget that you're over enthusiastic about the effect of new technology in the short term. And that means that if you're doing something new with an emerging technology that you wrote, I mean, typically when I went to business school about 10, 15 years ago, I learned that if you write a business case, that typically it takes twice as long and the benefits are half. If you're in technology, all of that factoring becomes even worse, right? It's going to take even longer and the benefits are going to pay off even later. So I think that's important to keep in mind. That also means that some technologies that people say, yeah, by now they're boring. They're still not boring, right? If you think about the internet, I lived through the 2001 bubble. I had my first internet company in the 90s. But still today, there's people riding that wave. The internet is still booming. I mean, that's 2 decades later, more than 2 decades later, we're still benefiting from this. And if you think, when was it announced, the big I think the Times cover of the internet with the internet on it was in the 80s, right? So then you're talking 3-4 decades that we're living of that wave of the internet. So I think one advice to entrepreneurs is if you won't go all out into the new technologies, but there's a lot to gain from the technologies that already have been around. And I think that's one of the things that in our courses, so we do a lot of courses for all kinds of folks, from large corporates, for NGOs, for startups, young entrepreneurs, more seasoned individuals, is we try and give them a couple of these insights. So it's not about knowing the latest and greatest of technology. If you want to know the latest and greatest on AI, you can just go on the web, you can get it. But it's understanding some of these patterns. And it's learning the mindset you need in order to be successful. Almost the operating system of your leadership, rather than the application, the easy skills that you can get on Udemy. If you want to learn how to code on Python, there's 1,000 courses out there. If you want to learn how to negotiate, you can learn that with the touch of a button today. Just go on Masterclass, Udemy, probably on YouTube, there's free classes, everything. So those apps are easy. The data, just downloading the data. What's the latest on AI? What does the World Economic Forum predict the new emerging technology will be? All of that you can download for free. The skill's a little bit harder, but we play on the operating system. How do you make sense of all of this? How do you, as a leader, grow? How do you create the operating system that allows you to benefit from the apps and from the data that's all out there?
Indeed, sir, you have told many important things, and I must believe that the things which you have told will be fruitful for our viewers. And I must say the kind of energy you brought into this session was very inspiring for all of us. Thank you so much, sir, for joining and giving your important time. We look forward to conduct more sessions with you in future.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a real joy. Thank you all for watching this, and I hope to meet you somewhere online or in the physical world when we can travel again. And I wish you all a lot of safety and good health.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. It was a great session with you.
On the ground is where I stand. Never give up, that was always the plan. It's so cold outside. I'm alone, I'm alright. It's so cold outside. I'm alone.